I came across this video on YouTube Shorts recently. After finishing the short and it started repeating, I paused the video and stared at my phone. I stared at my phone for about 10 minutes while contemplating my feelings: anger, despair, confusion, then eventually back to nothingness. You know those TikToks that are so bad they're somehow good? This video wasn't that. This video represented a cultural rock bottom for our species. Historians will look back at this video and point to it as the representation of the worst cultural time in human history. I'll play the video in its entirety. Then I'll break down why this video is the worst piece of media ever to exist. If I had to suffer through this, so should you.
So this is the response from the guy that made this video.
I make all the girls that I bring home walk through this, because if they don't fit through this, then they probably shouldn't be coming home with me.
Let's talk about it. I have a lot of friends who are high school teachers, and they've been talking a lot about how it's a huge problem with teenage boys that they are obsessed with creators like this, the wannabe Andrew Tates of the world, because grown men don't find this funny. At least grown men who don't hate women don't find this funny. And those groups will make up 95% of this guy's following, because it's definitely not women. And then these young boys and angry men will then take your tactics and apply them to their own lives and get rejected, which makes them more angry, which then just gives you a bigger audience to peddle this kind of crap. And look, man, it's your right to build a platform to be the king of the incels and teenage boys, but it's weird. It's weird. That's the only, you're weird.
Nietzsche distinguishes between two moral systems, the master morality and the slave morality. The master morality values pride, strength, and nobility, while the slave morality values things like kindness, empathy, and sympathy. The master morality leads to a judgment of good and bad, while the slave morality leads to a judgment of good and evil. In the master morality, good is associated with the nobility and their life-affirming qualities, such as strength, wealth, and power. Bad in this context is simply the opposite of these qualities. It is associated with the common, the weak, and the low. It's important to note that bad in this context is not morally reprehensible or evil, it's just inferior or less desirable. The concept of evil arises with the slave morality. According to Nietzsche, the slaves, unable to attain the qualities valued by the masters, re-evaluate their own qualities, such as humility, sympathy, and kindness, as good. They then define evil as the opposite of these qualities, the qualities associated with the masters. This evil is not just inferior or less desirable, it's morally reprehensible and worthy of condemnation. Using this framework, the video can be described as the following. 1. Individual who thinks their nobility shows off how wealthy they are by being able to deny women sex using an arbitrary filter, the space between the door. 2. Individual who thinks nobility is evil since he's not showing humility. However, this individual wants others to adhere to their own moral framework. Bad meet evil. Evil meet bad. Neither one of you sat down to determine what you think is good. Instead, you are making content to look good to other people who share your same moral framework. In Simulacra and Simulation, Jean Baudrillard wrote about something he called the hyper-real, where hyper-real is the real that has been replaced by images and signs. He argued that in a hyper-real world, the distinction between reality and its representation is lost, and that the authenticity of the original has been replaced by a simulation. He argued that in a hyper-real world, we are no longer able to tell the difference between the original and its representations. I want to define this TikTok a little differently. In the first clip, some guy gets in front of his camera to record a video about an imaginary scenario. Obviously, if he's taking a girl home, he would know how big she is already. So it's unlikely he'll risk not getting laid on a silly shit test. The second person takes offense to the imaginary scenario that the first person online then pulls out his camera and records a video. Which begs the question, what does any of this have to do with how either of these people treat women? In Sisyphus' video Chronically Online, he defines this type of content as religious anti-rationalism. Religious anti-rationalism is a form of anti-intellectualism. where the individual defines logic and reason as bad and emotion as positive.
Here, to be offended, even on behalf of another group, is justifiable grounds to censor the accused.
This type of anti-intellectualism works to police language and behavior to the point of absurdity. This specific video polices an imagined scenario, where he even describes it as the cause of a mental health crisis in young men, despite this video not being even remotely related to reality. The Bechdel test is a way to measure the representation of women in fiction. It was invented by Alison Bechdel to assess the representation of women in film, TV, and other media.
Morty, do you know what the Bechdel test is?
The what?
For God's sake, Morty, the formula for measuring female agency in a story proposed by lesbian cartoonist Allison. What the hell are they teaching you in that school?
Other stuff!
Then you've killed us both!
Why is lesbian part of her job title?
Oh, now you're progressive?
What is the test?
To pass the Bechdel test, a piece of media must have two female characters who talk to each other about something other than a man. The Bechdel test is not a perfect test for women in media, but it's a fairly good litmus test for it. I want to propose another test. Using the same framework as the Bechdel test, I want to assess the suppression of women in media. To do this, I'll invert the logic of the Bechdel test. We'll call this the anti-Bechdel test. To pass the anti-Bechdel test, two men must talk to each other about something that all women should do or be. This isn't a perfect test for the suppression of women in media, but it doesn't make sense either. In this TikTok, the first person talks about how he makes all women he comes home with walk through this small opening, and the second person talks about how he thinks all women should avoid this guy. Since both men in this video apply a should to all women, this video passes the anti-Bechdel test, meaning that this video, no matter how well-intentioned, actively suppresses women in media. Pragmatism is a philosophical tradition that began in the United States around 1870. Its origins are often attributed to Charles Sanders Peirce, a logician who first stated the Pragmatic Maxim. However, it was William James, a psychologist and philosopher, who popularized the term in the philosophy. Pragmatism in its simplest form is a philosophy that emphasizes practical consequences or real-world effects as vital components of both meaning and truth. Pragmatists argue that ideas and concepts should be judged not by their inherent or absolute truth, but by their usefulness and efficacy. If a concept or idea works to solve a problem or achieve a desired outcome, it is considered true in the pragmatic sense. Looking at this video through the lens of pragmatism, we can view it like this. Individual 1. The intention of this video is to have him look good. Individual 2. The intention of this video is to make a difference in young men's mental health. Neither one of these goals were met since the first individual was roasted for being an idiot, and the second individual only made young men feel more scrutinized. Both of these people failed to achieve any kind of result with their media and, in a pragmatic sense, are peddling lies. Utilitarianism is an ethical theory that determines right from wrong by focusing on outcomes. Utilitarianism holds that the most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. Given that, for the past 3 moral frameworks, this video has been shown to be the worst piece of media ever produced. We can review the video in its utilitarianism value. Since this video brings so much misery, anger, and suffering into the world, the only ethical thing to do is for governments to put down their arguments and get all remaining copies of this video thrown into the sun. Sun, 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 sun. Sun, 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 sun. Sun, 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 sun. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel to get more content like this. I hope to see you again soon.